Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's that time again for another live stream attempt for making a new shirt. This time we should be at the last episode for this shirt. If you remember right, let me get the shirt back out. We finished the front of the shirt, we finished the collar of the shirt, and we did the snaps. So this is the hardest part of any shirt, is the whole collar and neckband, the front and the yoke, along with putting the snaps on in the center front, okay? If a shirt had pockets, it would have been that much, but we skipped the pockets for this one. So the next step is the back and then finally the sleeve. Now this is going to be a summertime shirt, so it will be short sleeves. So I don't have to mess around with the plackets and the cufflinks. So let's go here. Let's see now. Let's try that. Okay, here we are on the cutting table. Put that aside. Here are the patterns that we've been using. Now we're not going to do this is for the cufflinks. We're not going to do the cufflinks. Okay, we'll set that aside. We've already done the under collar. We've already done the collar, which is this one. We've done the interfacing, which is that one. And we've done the yoke, which is that one. And we did the front, which is this one. Now, we don't have a pattern for the sleeve, but they're fairly easy. This is a pattern for half of the back, so that's the next thing we're going to cut. We're going to take the remainder of the patterns and set them aside so I don't accidentally cut them up. And now let's take the remainder of the shirt and set that aside so I don't cut that apart by mistake as well. So let's see, what do we want to use for let's see now. Let's try for the back, let's use the bright colored yellow-green fabric I have here, very light fabric. This is going to be a summer shirt, so light colored to reflect the sun's rays. So let's open this up. And the pattern is for half of the back, which means at this part of the pattern right here, you put that in the fold for the center back. So let's get this spread out and we will get a fold. Let's see. Let's see. Something like that, okay? So we're going to put the edge of the pattern right here. Let's get everything out of the way of the cutter. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I did two things before doing this video. First of all, you probably remember I had some trouble cutting. So I replaced the blade in the Olfa circular cutter, and in the machine, I refilled the bobbin, so the bobbin should not run. So those two things I've done, so hopefully I won't have any hang-ups in doing this part of the shirt. So let's go back to the cutting table. Okay. Now here's the fabric. It's folded right here. So we take the pattern for the back and we're going to place the center back right here at the fold. Now it doesn't have to be exact. Actually, I'll leave a little extra room because we always have a pleat in the back where the back joins with the yoke. So let's leave a little extra room like that. We're not going to bother cutting the bottom because that's already, that will be cut when the final shirt gets cut and everything gets cut together. So all we're going to do here is to cut here along with the sleeve and then cut the top like that. So we're going to come up like so. And now that the cutter has been replaced, it cuts a lot easier than it did the other day when I did this the last time. So let's see. All right. Okay. Now the back has been cut out. We'll set the remainder of the fabric aside. We're done with the pattern. We'll set that aside. And now what we're going to do, we're going to serge this. Now in serging this, we're not going to worry about the bottom. This is the end of the bolt of the fabric right here. So that's not going to unravel as much. And besides, it will be cut and serged when the shirt itself is put together and we cut the bottom and do a hem. But we're going to serge here. Let's see, you can run the serger here, around the sleeve, across the top here, and then the sleeve, and then down the other side. So let's head on over to the serger. Uh-oh, something happened to that camera. What did I do wrong? Oh my, oh. Well, we have to do that. Nope. There, I must have had something set wrong. Let me try something. That does that way. Then we go that way. Huh, must have made a mistake. Okay, so that's the serger. We would microphone to the one that's at the server. Over here. Now with the new setup, I've got a separate microphone for each, the sewing machine, the serger, and the cutting table, in hopes that the sound should be better than it was when I was using the built-in microphone on the laptop for the entire room. So if you have any comments about the sound, please let me know in the chat line, or you can leave comments on the video, which will remain up on Facebook and on YouTube. And I plan to submit this video to Bellingham's public access channel, which is online and on cable here in Bellingham, Washington, from 6 p.m. to midnight every Sunday night is the public access time. So they'll air it sometime between those hours. Or you can always email me, Allen, A-L-L-Y-N, at WELL.com, or look up Mark Allen on Facebook or YouTube. I would have wanted to live stream on LinkedIn, but the restream to LinkedIn link apparently is only experimental, and you have to have a paid account on LinkedIn, and I am too cheap to do that. And besides, I don't use LinkedIn that much because it's used primarily if you want a job, and I'm not looking for a job now. I am happily, see, my position is entry-level retired engineer from, or better yet, what I tell all my friends here, I am an escaped mental patient from the great insane asylum called the Intel Corporation. I used to do security engineering there. That was one of my jobs there, but I was also the fashion runway star at Intel Corporation, whether they liked it or not. And in fact, there is a fairly well-known YouTube video showing precisely what my behavior was on my last few days at work at Intel. You just go to YouTube. I don't remember the URL right offhand, but you just look up Mark Allen leaving Intel Corporation, or something like that. So now that we did the surgery, now we have the back. It's been surged. Now what we're going to do now, we're going to get the rest of the shirt and the back of the back, and there is no, let's see, oh, I forgot to cut that trail off like that. Okay, so the back of the shirt will get merged with the back of the yoke, something like this. So the good side of the yoke, which is this, and it doesn't seem to matter which side is the good side. The stitching looks better on the other side. So the weaving looks a little bit better here. So this is the good side of the back right here. And this is the good side of the back of the yoke. There's the front. And these would go together like this. Now, you noticed that the back of the shirt is a little bit larger than the back of the yoke, and that's intended, because most shirts will have a pleat in the back to allow for your arm movement. So what we're going to do, we're going to find the center of the yoke and the shirt and mark it. We'll do a small stitch right here to anchor the center. Then we're going to anchor each end, a small stitch at each one. Then we'll figure out where to place the pleat. And then we do the pleat on each side. That guarantees that the end will always match and the center is in the right place. So I'm going to find myself a pen to mark the center of the shirt right here. Okay, one of you asked, what is the neck face? The neck face, actually, here's the collar. Okay, here's the back of the shirt, and here's the collar, the outside. On the inside, you have, this is the neck face here. This is the lining of the neck. Here are the interfacing for either side. They were stitched and then folded back and top stitched on. So they were folded back here. The neck was folded back here. So this provides stiffening for the collar as well as the front. So this is I think you were referring to this as the neck face. There's two different ways of doing shirts. It's this one, which is very easy, goes together very well, and it looks quite well. Then there's the kind where you have the collar band, and the collar is stitched into the collar band, but there's so much that can go wrong with that method as far as stretching or alignment. This goes together a lot easier. This method is not as suitable for dress shirts or very formal shirts for, formal occasion. But now that I'm retired, I don't care about looking correct for work. So let's do this. What we got here, we've set the start of the back at number 10 on the ruler line on the pad, and the other end of the collar is near 32. That's 22. So it would be 11 plus 11. So halfway would be at 21, which is, I believe, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. That, if you center these, the line at 21, which is going to be something like that, we'll verify 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. We're going to take the pen, make a tiny marking inside the seam allowance, right there. This mark the center of the back. Now we're going to take the collar. This is the collar. No, I'm sorry, the yoke. We're going to take the yoke. Once again, we're going to put it at the 10-inch line on the cutting grid and see where it comes to. And it's going to be coming out at the 30. So 10, that's 20. So from 10, that's 10 inches halfway. So 10 plus 10 is 20. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There, let me see, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Well, the center of the back of the yoke is right there. I'm going to make a line right there, a tiny line. Okay, that marks the center of the back of the yoke. Now, this marking, I was not as careful to put this inside the seam allowance because this is the wrong side of the yoke. So, but this is on the right side of the back. So let's line them like that, and we can do a stitch in the machine. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine now. So let's figure out which camera that is. Going to be right there. So I do try that. All right. And we switch to a different microphone. Yeah, that looks okay. That looks pretty well right there. Let's get the mouse of the computer out of the way so I won't inadvertently, do something with the computer. So let's try that. All right. Bring everything over to the machine. So here, now this camera is not very good. So here is the center of the back of the shirt right there, that black mark, if you can see it. And here is the center of the yoke right there. So let's get these lined up like that. What we're going to do, we're going to do a stitch. Now we do a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the back to yoke seam. So it gets those marks matched together. I'm going to start 1 inch before that mark. You can get the fabric lined up again. 1/2 inch before it to 1/2 inch after it. So something like that. Appropriate stitch length. Okay, we did a stitch, and let's do a quick check of the tension. Things look okay. And now we got that part done. Now we go to one end, which is right here. Whoops, there's another trailing thread I forgot to cut. You always forget to cut those off when you're doing the serging. So now we're going to take the one side of the yoke and match it to the sleeve hole. So like this. And we're going to just do about an inch here. Like that. That lined up like this. And we're going to go in about an inch. Okay, that's going to anchor this side, and the same thing on the other side. We'll turn this around. Something like that. Okay. That lined up like that, like this. 1 inch in. Like that. Now, when you go back to the working table, show you what we have here. Here, put the camera on the camera. Here is one end, it's anchored. Here's the center that's anchored, and here's the other end, okay? Now, figure out, let's try, most shirts have the pleat toward the center. So let's do this. We have the center of the shirt, which is, let's see now, center, which is right there. We're going to do this. Let's stitch out from the center, say 3 inches. We go 3 inches out and stop from the center on each side. 3 inches there and 3 inches right there. Let's see, yeah, 3 inches right there. It doesn't have to be exact. Remember, nobody can notice a mistake by a factor of ½ inch or even 3/4 of an inch when they're standing 6 feet away from that. So we're just going to stitch out to here and then stitch out to here. Let's go back to the sewing machine. Cut this thread off first. I think my next investment would probably be a better camera with a sewing machine, so you can get a better idea. But it's going to be really hard to focus in on it, and it may mean that I would have to mount a camera somehow over my shoulder, or maybe wear a camera on my head or right on my neck. I don't know, but this is kind of difficult to see what is going on here. Okay, so let's do that. So we're 3 inches off on that side. Now I'm going to turn it around. You notice I'm always keeping the same fabric on top. That way the stretching will be consistent on either side of the garment. Okay, so now we are 3 inches right there. Now, to do the pleat, what we're going to do, I'm going to come back to the working table so you can see it. Do a transition. Do a transition to that. And what we're going to do now, I can try to show you here, easier than sewing it at the machine. Here we stitched out 3 inches from the center, and we anchored each end. So what we're going to do, we're going to stitch from here and work our way to here. And then, as we work our way, we're going to pull it tight, and we're going to create a pleat, something like that, and stitch it. With that side, and the same goes that side. Okay, since we've already anchored it, I don't have to worry about finagling around with measurement. The measurements are already made by doing this anchoring. Now, let's just check while we have it out of the machine or any issues with tension. So now let's go back to the machine. This is where a lot of time is spent at the machine. So I've got to do going back and forth between the machine and the working table to get this right. The sewing books and procedures for people who do sewing as a hobby do this completely different. In my opinion, is cumbersome. They have you measure and mark and pin and measure and mark and pin and stuff like this. So I am kind of going off the book and doing my own method, which may not be as formal, but it still does show the creativity. Okay, they just did it that. So you see a pleat right there, and you got to stitch it to that side. All right, turn the whole thing around, keeping the same fabric facing up. Go back down like that. Now, same thing. Going from the edge to the center. We're going to hold this tight to force the pleat, okay? Then we're just going to stitch right down here, making sure the edges stay alignment. And we have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Something like this. Now, I take it slowly. I never go full speed on this machine. In fact, when I bought the machine, I told them to keep the speed, full speed, reduced. And now, we've done the first seam across the whole thing. Now we have to do the top stitching. And what that means, we're going to pull this open like this, and the top stitch has to be on the yoke side. You don't want to top stitch across a pleat. You top stitch on the opposite side from the pleat. So that, in that case, that's on the yoke. So I'm going to press the seam over on the yoke side, which is to my left, or towards you as you see it from this camera. Okay. Then we do a simple top stitch on the yoke, stitching the seam to the yoke, creating the double seam or the lap seam, which of course adds strength and durability to the seam. All my garments I sew with double seam because I've seen a lot of trouble with just a simple single seam. Now here, I'm going across the pleats, making sure that everything is pulled underneath to my left or towards you on the camera. And here we go. Doing a top stitch on the yoke. And right there. And let's just check. It looks like the tension looks okay. So now, let's go back to the work. Actually, let's go back to the main camera. So what we have to do, we go back to the working table. We go back to the main camera, which is that one. Do a transition. There we are. Now, I'm going to stay on that microphone. All right. Now, here is the shirt. Here's the back sewn on to the yoke, and here are the pleats right here. So now I could put this on. It's going to look something like this. Now, I still have no sleeves now. You get an idea. Here's the front, and here's the back, okay? Now, the next step is the sleeve. So what we have to do now is to measure and cut the sleeve. So, let's go back to the work table. Okay, now, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have the pattern for the sleeve. Now, before I go on, let me just quickly go over and look at the comments. Okay, I want to thank you for the compliments. So let's see. Now, with the sleeve, what we're going to do now, first of all, we notice now, actually, we notice a mismatch between the front. Let's see if you can see that. See, we have a mismatch right here between this front and the yoke. Let's correct that. We'll be cutting a new armhole to the yoke. This has to be, actually, you know what? Yeah, this has to be serged. Let's check the other side, make sure that was matched okay. And you know, that one a little bit off as well. I should have noticed those early. So let's get those cut properly cut and serged now before we go any further with the sleeve. So we have to go back to the serger and reserge the shoulders. So that is this camera right there. And then we bring up the serger microphone. All right, by the way, my mother did some sewing when I was a child, but the one thing that she never used, and actually I have never even seen one, is this machine, a serger. Most people don't have one, but they're very handy because it does what's called an overlock on the edge of the fabric to keep it from fraying. Also, it's excellent for working with stretch materials. Like you want to make a pair of Lycra shorts, for example. A serger is all but essential with working with stretch materials like Lycra. Or spandex. You want to make a pair of spandex pants. Same thing. The serger comes in real handy in doing that. I like it because it saved me from having to fold the fabric in when I do a seam. Now here's the other side right here. You can see right here. Here's what it did. It stitched over the edge to prevent the edge from fraying. I have never seen one of these in my whole life until I bought my first Bernina sewing machine. And I bought a Bernina serger at the same time. Interesting irony. I thought that the serger would help in my work with clear plastic. Of course, I know now it's unnecessary. However, when I eventually graduated from work making clear plastic raincoats to making clothing, then I realized how important the serger is. Now, this machine is an industrial serger, and it goes a lot faster and it's a lot more robust than a domestic serger. But I do a lot of serging with it. I've had it for 5 years, and I've never had to have it serviced. So now we've got those two pieces serged. Let's go back to the working area. Now, what we have to do now is measure the armholes. This is where your arms come out of the body of the shirt. That's called an armhole. Now, let's measure it. You won't see the other end of it. There's the 0 line on the table. We're going to come out, and it's about 26 inches for that one. Check the other one. Okay, we go across like that. Same thing, about 26 inches. Now, I need to show you something. Just because when you stretch it like this, makes it 26 inches, the cut would have to be longer because you're ½ inch in. So that's the radius that's further in from the circle. So it's going to be more like probably close to 26.5 to 27 inches. Now, when I cut the sleeve, that's going to be the opposite curve, and the line that's a ½ inch from the edge will actually be shorter, so I have to make that longer. And I'll probably have to make the outer edge of the sleeve at least 27, maybe 27.5 inches. Even if it's not exactly correct, what I do is pleat either the sleeve or the shirt as necessary in the underarm, in the back of the shirt, right up against the sleeve seam. I've done it many times. Nobody's noticed it. I know it's not proper for a well-made shirt, but it's one of those things that it's concealed enough that nobody, I've had absolutely no one complain about it. So we know that we got a cut length of 26 inches, probably close to 26.5 to 27 here. So let's make the sleeves about, to be conceived, let's go stretch some. Let's make the sleeves about 27 inches or a little bit over on the cut. So let's put this aside so I won't accidentally cut into it. So I'm going to take, let's take the red fabric. Take this fabric, and we're going to make the sleeve out of the red fabric, just like the sleeves I'm wearing, okay? Now, let's see. Oh, let's see now. Let's see how best to arrange this. Let's see. There are 2 sleeves, so 27 inches, so it's going to be, if I fold this like so, whoops. Now we're going to make 2 pieces. Okay, so this has to be 27 inches folded. So we're at the, that should be 20 right there. 20 plus 20 is 40. So we have 47, yeah, it's 47 inches. Okay, so now to make the job easier, this is 2 sleeves right here. But the sleeves are symmetrical. So if possible, we'll fold it over. Fold both of these pieces over. There's now 2 layers folded, okay? Total of 4 layers we're cutting through, but we're actually making 2 pieces, okay? We're going to cut a curve. The shoulder of the sleeve is a curve. Now let's make sure that this is completely, when they're folded, we want them to be matched as best as possible. There's no overlap. Okay. So that's going to be something like this. And I just eyeball it. Okay. It's going to be something like that. Okay. With a cut of the sleeve. All right. Now, I said 27, so 13.5 on each half, or a little bit more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's see if I get this right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Right around there should be enough. So where my finger is, that's 13. What that's going to do, we line the edge up with a line on the grid at about the 13 mark. We're going to cut in like this and do a gentle curve so we come out straight at the end of the sleeve like that, okay? Then we do a straight cut, and I just eyeball it, something like that, okay? Now we pull this out, and there's the cut for the sleeves. The rest of the fabric, let's just cut the waist away, like that. The rest of the fabric was set aside. Okay, let's confirm these. Let's do a quick measure. Actually, no, we come over here. The 10 to about 35, but it's a curve, so 10, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, about 36, 37. Okay, so it looks like they're close enough. Now remember, any mismatch, we can always pleat it under the arms. And now what I have to do, I'm going to serge all sides of both sleeves, because this will get folded up at the hem, like this. Because that has to be serged on. So we go back to the serger, which is, sure I'm on the right one. Yep, there's the serger. We'll bring the correct microphone like that. Let me just check a couple of things. Okay. All right, now we're going to do the surgery. Now, because these are short sleeves, we don't have to worry about doing the plackets or the cufflinks, which will save at least an hour to an hour and a half of work on the shirt. And also because it's short sleeve, it's ideal for warmer weather in the summertime. And most of this is fairly light fabric, it's not the heavier upholstery or decorator fabrics, with which I make a lot of my artistic homemade clothing. Very interesting, the very first shirt I made, which was a very simple shirt, although it's long sleeve, but very simple, using the same colored fabric. That shirt I still have 1995, 2005, 25 years later, I still have that shirt, and some people still think it's brand new. It's held up exceptionally well in just normal twill cotton fabric from, what was it, Fabricland, which was the fabric store back in that day in Seattle. And which is interesting to point out that that shirt, like most of my own homemade garments, has outlasted anything that I have purchased. There's an interesting story that I had an emergency and I had to make a wallet in the middle of the night because I knew I was about ready to go on a trip and I had no wallet. But the previous wallet I had was worn out and I was going on I don't know if it was overseas or some long trip, and I did not want to be without a wallet. So, about 12 at midnight, in my skivvies, and after taking my shower, getting ready to go to bed, I realized, oops, I don't have a wallet. So I had some remaining leather, scrap leather, remaining from a purse that I made for my niece for Christmas. and I was going to throw it away, but I'm glad I had it. And I took that leather strap, and in about 45 minutes, at 12 to about quarter to 1 in the morning, very anxious, I made a very simple wallet with 2 pockets for bills and 2 pockets for credit cards. That was in around the fall, no, around Christmas time, 1999 or maybe January of 2000. That wallet stayed quite strong for nearly 20 years. I bought another wallet, I think in the fall of 2019, just before the pandemic started. But that's 1999, that's 20 years later. The wallet did finally show some signs of wear. But after 20 years, and actually it was still useful. On the other hand, before I made that wallet, I had bought a wallet for about $30 to $40 at Nordstrom's in Seattle in the men's department. And that wallet failed completely in about 2 years. So it just came apart. It just really came apart. And I did not treat it any worse than the wallet I made. The wallet I made, since it was made in an emergency, I didn't really spend that much time doing a first-class job at it. And the scrap leather I used was about 50 cents worth of scrap leather. So we're done with the surgeon. So let's go back to the working area. So let's get the correct camera online. There we are. Get the correct microphone. Okay. We've serged the 2 sleeves. They're right here. Okay. Let's set those aside. Now, what I do is grab the shirt. All right, here is the body of the shirt. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take each of the sleeves. Now, these sleeves are just plain. There's no marking features on each of these sleeves. There's nothing that would have to match something on the shirt, and there's nothing that has to be symmetrical with the other sleeve. So if this was a mosaic, like many of my sleeves are, I would carefully mark the center of the sleeve, or the nearest feature to the center of the sleeve on each of the sleeve, and also mark a similar feature on the armhole of the shirt in the center. And I would start stitching in the center to make sure the center of the sleeve would match, because the eye would focus on the shoulder and not under the arm. Okay, so I'd go out. If there was mismatches at either end, I'd do a pleat. So there may be 2 pleats for each sleeve under the arm, but I didn't care because the eye would be drawn here. Here, we have a plain sleeve, and the shirt itself, we have the yoke and the arm, which are plain as well. So it doesn't matter where the center of the sleeve falls, like in relation to the center of the shirt. Now, with that in mind, we're just going to start at the front. So this yellow cotton with the snaps, that's the front. So we're going to take this is the right side, outside the shirt, and the twill on the sleeve is pretty much the same. We're just going to arbitrarily say that this is the right side of the sleeve. We fold this back over. We're going to start stitching back to back here, and then go around and see what happens at the other end. And we do any necessary pleating at this end in the back where they would be least noticeable, knowing that there's nothing remarkable on the center of the sleeve and there's nothing remarkable on the center of the shirt. So here we go. Let's head on over to the sewing machine. So we're going to do this first. Transition the microphone. And there we are. Now, grab the shirt and the sleeve, the first sleeve. Bring them to the sewing machine. Like this. We'll double check, always double check that we're on the right side. So this, make sure this is the outside of the shirt. You can see the yoke. It is. Always check and double check. You also make sure this is indeed the armhole we're sewing at here, and this is the top of the sleeve. I have made mistakes where I sewn the wrong part of either the shirt or the sleeve together. So I always double check. We'll match the edges. We're going to stitch 1/2 inch in for the seam allowance. Something like that. We'll start stitching. And we try to pull with equal tension on both the fabric on the top and the fabric on the bottom as we sew down the line. Knowing this is a curve, so there will be some unevenness in the tension. You probably can't see that well because of the fold in the fabric. So something like that, if you can see that. It's interesting, on the camera the fabric looks like it's pink. It is actually an orange red. The camera is doing some weird thinking with the color, but this is just a webcam used normally for conferences, not for making a piece of art. I think my next investment after I save up is some sort of decent camera that can effectively look over my shoulder at the sewing machine, especially so you can see what in the heck is going on, because right now you cannot see the foot very well. Let me try something. I'm going to try to bring this a little closer. The problem is that it interferes with my work, and the angle makes it harder to see. That's the problem. We're probably going to have to get a tripod and a small camera in the back of the machine. You can't put anything in front because it will be in my way. So we need a close-up camera on a small tripod behind the machine that kind of looks to that machine, or we're going to have something literally right on my shoulder, which would be tricky because it has the potential of easily getting in my way. Now we're moving along the armhole and sleeve sewing. Okay, now we're at the end. Now, you notice, if you can, it's about 1 inch overlap or too long on the part of the sleeve here. So we're going to do a pleat. We're going to first line up the end like that, and we're going to do a pleat to make up for that difference, or something like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. As I said, this is under the arm in the back. The most likely it would never get noticed, even if I pointed out, which I did once. They said, huh? I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't see anything wrong. So let's see. Do something like that. And we're done. We're done with the first seam on the first sleeve. Okay, now we repeat the process for the other side, which is right here. We're going to start with the front. Grab the other sleeve. I can reach it. Like that. Let's take a quick look and see what we have as far as the comments. All right, let's see. All right, now, okay, so this is the right side of the shirt, and this is the sleeve. Now you notice the shirt is now on the other side of the head of the machine. That's so that I can keep the sleeve garment at the top, just the same as I did on the other side. That keeps any stretching to be symmetrical. Now, sewing on this side of the arm is always more difficult to me because I'm right-handed. So it's going to go a little bit slower. We're going to line up the edges at the front, right there, like that. Get that over there, something like that. Get it locked down. And again, try to apply equal pressure on both of them, knowing that they are both curved. Now, granted, all your domestic sewing instructions, the ones you get either in the books about sewing or in your local friendly fabric stores sewing class, they always have you pin this whole thing together using pins to lock everything in place. To me, that takes a lot of time, and I find that you don't have to be fastidious in making sure that the ends match. You can either make up with it with pleats, let it go, because it may not make any difference, or cut it. Nobody has said anything about any mismatches or any anomalies in my work. Even if I point them out, as I said, they will say, yeah, I don't see it. So this allows me to relieve that time spent on being fastidious to time to be creative. To make something that is creative, yet still durable. So I've been throughout my entire sewing career, I've never really followed the instructions to the letter. Even when I made my first shirt, I started to deviate from the instruction, from what's on the pattern. And that shirt, it's as I said, 25 years old, still looks like new, and people ask me today, here in town, in Bellingham, where did I get it? They want to buy one. I said, sorry, it's 25 years old. So, okay, we're getting to the end. We have a little bit overlap on the sleeve part, so there'll be some pleating. So let's get close to it, like that, and let's get the end lined up. If you can see that right there. Something like that. We can create a pleat like that, stitch into it, and stitch to the end like that. Okay, now we've gotten the first seam done. So what we're going to do is pull this open now. We're going to do the top stitch. And let's do the top stitch. We don't want to top stitch over the pleat, so we're going to go over top stitch to yellow, which is opposite of the pleat, right here. We're going to make sure the seam is folded under the yellow, which is to my left, or towards you, or towards the camera, which of course you can't see. Now, if I had known that or thought about it, maybe I could have used a darker fabric for the back, so you wouldn't see the stitching, but that's fine. Black seam looks fine. Stitching looks fairly smooth, so the tensions look okay. There's nothing wrong with the seam that you see. Again, we're going top stitch, going towards the body of the garment, away from the sleeve. Something like that. Okay, that's the first one. That's the first sleeve. Whooped, I just bumped into the camera. Now we're going to do the other sleeve. All right, once again, we fold the seam over to the body, which again to my left, towards you, towards the camera. You do the same thing. We're on the other sleeve now. All right. So far, so good. A tiny bit of pulling. That's not bad. A little bit of pulling. Actually, right here is a little bit of pulling, but it's not too bad. Nothing that would get noticed at a distance. Interesting. I've had, before I did my sewing, I've had commercially made garments that have fell apart while wearing them in embarrassing ways, not too long after I purchased them. So the homemade clothing hasn't done that except once, when a pair of pants failed because the fabric was defective. So now, we got the sleeves on. Okay, let me just quickly show you. I'm going to go to the main camera, which is over here. All right, then I get off of that camera over there. Now, here, let's see, I'm going to show you, let's see, now it's the back. Here's one of the sleeves, over like that, and here's the other sleeve. So what we're going to do now, we're going to turn the shirt over inside out, like this. Okay, if I can hold it up like that. So we're going to stitch the bottom of the sleeve. Actually, we're going to stitch a hem for each sleeve. Then we're going to stitch the sleeve, the two sides of the sleeve together along with the two sides of the shirt down like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch a hem for the end, at the end of each sleeve. So let's go back to the sewing machine. Now, the hem has to be folded away from the outside or towards the wrong side. So we're going to, this is the outer edge end here. This is the inside because you can tell because you can see the serged seam right there. So we're going to take this and fold it. Actually, we're going to do the top of the stitch always looks better than the bottom side of the stitch. We're going to fold this back about an inch or so, like that. And put that in the machine. Now this is the correct side of the garment. There's the correct side. You can see the top stitching there. I always check that. Make that about an inch. And we start stitching the hem seam about 3/4 of an inch, something like this. Now, as we go down, we want to make sure it's consistently folded in. Now, the domestic sewing instruction will always have you press this and pin it. I don't bother with that. I can feel it, and I know if it's going right. If it's not absolutely perfect, so what? So let's just sew down the line there. Take a check. Things seem okay. The stitch is okay. And the tension looks okay. And we continue on to make sure it's folded under about an inch. And I can feel it. I can feel where the fold is. Kind of press it with my fingers and stitch on down the line like that. And let's check it. Things look okay there. Things look okay there. So let's do the other sleeve. Again, you fold it over an inch like that, under. Okay, we're on the outside of the garment, as you can see, looking at the top stitch on the seam here. So we're on the outside, or the good side of the garment. We're folding the hem in under into the inside. Again, we do a top stitch about 3/4 of an inch in to hold it in place. Now we're just going to fold it under, feel it, make sure it's about an inch in, press it a bit, and then help it along under the machine. Do a top stitch like that. And once again, we hold that like that. Okay, top stitch that. All right, so this is the top stitch for that sleeve. Everything looks okay. So now what we have to do, we bring the shirt backwards, inside out, and we will stitch the sleeve together. So here's the end of the sleeve. This is now the inside of the shirt turned inside out. This is the bottom of the sleeve right here. Okay, this would be the top of the sleeve. So we're going to take the ends, make sure the ends match. Okay, at the opening of the sleeve. You have a seam allowance like this. Make sure it goes all the way out. Now, go on with a regular seam. Now, we have to try to make sure, you can't see here, that the boundary between the body and the sleeve for each, the front and the back, match. You may have to stretch it a bit. If they don't match exactly, so what? Nobody's going to notice it. But I would like to try to get them as close as possible. Sometimes the measurement doesn't exactly fall right. But it looks like this one can be pretty much right on the butt, on the noggin. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, we're at the underarm right now, about ready to head down the side of the body of the shirt. Okay, now we're at the side, whoops. The side, the inseam, the side of the body. That's the inseam pants, but this is the inside of the side of the shirt. We finished with the inside of the sleeves. Now, the end. Now you notice there is a mismatch between the front and the back. That's okay. We're going to cut everything to the right size, reserge it, then make a simple hem. Here. So this is one side now. Okay, now we do the same for the other side. Then make sure the right side is facing the right side. I once did a project and I started one side right, but then when I got to the other side, I had the wrong side in, and I had to undo a full-blown, 4-foot seam, which is not pleasant. So you always check and double check everything before you go. But I don't trust myself. It is a real pain in the neck to undo a seam with a seam ripper without ruining the underlying fabric. And the more fragile the fabrics, the worse it is. The absolute worst are the silk fabrics and the rayon and silk fabrics. The really fine tapestry fabrics and jacquard fabrics I love to use for some of my garments. So I'm trying to get in the habit of being very careful. And by the way, it looked like the underarm here, it looked like it's going to match pretty well. So head on down, we're off the sleeve. We're now down the side of the shirt. Okay. Like this. Do this. Okay, now we're at the end. We are now at the end. Now, let's see, do that. Now, at this point, most shirt makers would stop here with just a single seam on the underarm and the inside of the shirt. Most dress shirts are like that. I refuse to stop here, and I will indeed fold this over and do a second seam to make it stronger, make it more durable. There's a story about that I actually witnessed, that convinces me that's the way the thing to do it. Now, to do that, it's a bit tricky. You have to we're going to actually do the top stitching right here, okay? This is the seam where we do the top stitching, if you can see it, right there. That's remember the garment is inside out. So we have to sew inside the garment. You don't want to do it outside the garment, otherwise sew the sleeve. You will sew the sleeve closed. So what we have to do, we have to get this under the machine like this. And we see that the pleat that's formed because of the mismatch. The pleat has to be the opposite side of the top stitching. So this top stitching is going to go to my left or toward you on the camera on this sleeve. So what we have to do, we have to carefully pull the sleeve back over the machine. So the machine is actually wearing the sleeve as if it was my arm. So now this, I know you can't, let me try this. Move this like this. Really hard to see it. This is the end of the sleeve, right? And let's see, right here. That's the end of the sleeve where my hand would come out. But this is the outside of the sleeve turned inside out. I'm going to do, and this is what will look like inside the sleeve. So that's going to be pulled over to my left, which is toward the front of the garment, away from the pleat, which is in the back of the garment. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put this under the machine now, and we always check to make sure nothing else is under there. That's why I do this inside out. If we did this with the good side out, the other side of the sleeve will be under the machine, and we don't want that. So there's no choice but to pull the shirt essentially over the free arm of the machine. This is hard enough now with fabric. Doing clear vinyl, if I make a shirt out of clear vinyl, but yes I have, this process of pulling the sleeve back over the head of the machine could take an hour. It has happened. So now we're going to slowly start along. Now the story I have about double seams versus single seams. I saw an ad in a magazine by what was it? No, was it Prada or was it? I think it was Prada. Prada made this line of beautiful ladies' clear raincoats. They were $900 a piece, and they were available at a store called Mario's. Very high-end chain of clothing stores. I don't know if it's still around now. This we're talking about, we're going way back to about 2004, 2005, something like that. Quite a long time ago. So I was curious. I was living in Portland. The Mario's in Portland did not have any, but they told me I could go up to the Mario's and see them at the Mario's in Seattle. So I made a trip to Seattle, primarily just to see those raincoats and to compare the workmanship with those $900 raincoats to the raincoats that I made using, $50 in raw materials and about, if I'm really fastidious, about 6 or 7 hours of my time. Okay, so I went up there with high hopes of seeing something that I could aspire to. Well, I walked into Mario's, and I walked upstairs. This is in Seattle, Mario's in Seattle. I got off the train from Portland, went right straight to Mario's in downtown, right down by Westlake, I believe, somewhere around there. And I was about 20 feet. By the way, that's the first sleeve. So we did the top stitch for the first sleeve. Now we're going to do the second sleeve. Same method. Now, as I was saying, I was about 20 feet. I just got off the escalator. I had to ride the escalator upstairs. And by the way, the pleat is right here. If you can see it. See it right there. There's the pleat. So I'm going to pull this back. The top stitching is going to go to my left. Get the sleeve. Let's see. We're oriented right. All right. There's the seam right there. You can see it. That's the seam right there. Anyhow, so I was about 20 feet away from the rack. They had them on. 20 feet away, just stepping off the escalator with high hopes. Then my hopes were dashed. I had it wrong. By the way, the seam has to be pulled now to my right. It's the front. It's now on the opposite side. It's the opposite sleeve. So that's to my right, away from you and the camera. It's a pleat is on my left, toward you or the camera. You want to go away from there. So I immediately notice a discrepancy. The side of the garment. I'm sorry, the side of the garment, the side seam of the garment on any garment should be anchored properly at the bottom hem of the garment. I'll show you that. I'll explain that as I get to that on this shirt. So, turned out they had a single stitched seam down the sleeves of this is, yeah, right now, this is single stitch here. I'm doing the double stitching, but when I finished the first seam, that was single stitching. So imagine they did the same thing, but now they're not doing what I'm doing now. They just left it at the single seam. That was bad enough. However, they failed to properly anchor the seam at the bottom or the hem of the garment. It just stopped. They just stopped sewing, did not stop back and forth, did not use seam glue, did not anchor it into the fold of the seam itself. So on the rack, not even sold, from 20 feet away, I saw that the side seam had pulled apart up to about 2 inches up from the hem of the jacket, of the coat. So it was just pulled open. So I walked to it and I looked closely, and sure enough, the seam unraveled, unthreaded, up about 2 inches away from the hem. That's on a new raincoat, and because of that defect, it was marked down from $900 to $700. Now, I'll say it another way. For $700, which is a $200 discount from $900, you're buying a garment that's already falling apart. Let By the way, here is the bottom here. Now, right now, okay, let me just do this. I'm going to do a little demonstration of that. Let's say, I'm going to reach over here. I'm going to grab, I'm going to say that, all right, here, never mind that this is fraying. Actually, no, let's not use this. I'm going to try something else. Let's take this. Okay. Let's just take some junk fabric here. And let's see. All right, let's see. Now, let's say that this seam right here, we're just going to sew these together, something like this, okay? So this is going to be the side. So let's pretend this is the bottom of the garment here. Actually, this is the camera in a better position. And say this is the bottom and about to sew the side seam. But I'm going to do a single seam that's not anchored properly. I'm going to turn off the back and forth anchoring that's automatic in this machine. So I'm going to start stitching the side seam right about there, okay? It doesn't matter how long it is to do a stitch, like that. Okay, now, stop it. Now, watch carefully. I know this camera is terrible. Let's do this. All right, now watch carefully right there. If I pull over time, see that's coming apart, okay? That's already an inch off, okay? That's because this was not properly anchored. Now to anchor it, now I'm going to do this again. But this machine has an automatic feature where it does the back and forth. I'm going to turn that on now. We go click, click. Now watch carefully. Let me bring this closer. Something like this. Now you can't see it. That's the problem. The damn thing. Now watch what happens when I start stitching a seam. You see it going back and forth. That anchors. That provides some anchoring for the stitch. Okay? Then I'll stitch and stitch and watch what happens at the end when I stop. I press the pedal backwards to indicate that I've finished sewing. And watch what happens, if you can see it. It goes back and forth. and it stopped stitching. It anchored it. So now I did stitching back and forth. Now, that's not enough. Now let's create a hem. We're going to create a hem, and we're going to fold this so that the stitching is, if I create a hem, and I'm going to stitch a line right about here. I know this is going to be hard to see. Let's see. So the fabric is folded under, okay? But you notice that the stitching that I did for the seam goes folded in and under. And I'm going to sew the hem closed like this, okay? Now, you notice under the hem on the inside, I've stitched over this stitch. This creates an anchoring of the side seam to the hem. So this will not, you pull hard on this will not unravel. Now, this is just a single stitch. In my garment, as I showed you, I double stitch the side seam, and then I will also sew it into the hem. I'll be showing you that. But with their raincoats, they had essentially an open hem that was not folded back, but it was plastic. It had a decorative piece to it, but it was not secured, properly secured together. And the side seam was not anchored, so it pulled open, and it showed on the rack. So let's get back to this. We're going to go back to the work table. So let's go to that camera, which is, let's see. Here I am. I'm going to go to the middle camera, which is that, and the microphone, which is that, and make sure that we're still on the line. It looks like we are. I'm going to do a quick audio check. If I can listen to it. Yep, the sound is working. Okay, now, here it is. Now here it said the double seam properly anchored. Now, we notice we have a mismatch between the sides and the back. Okay, now, we're just going to take this and we're going to cut. I'm just going to eyeball it. Nothing has to be really fancy. I'm just going to cut right across like that so they match. I have to reserge this, okay, because the hem will be stitched from here. I'm also going to secure, I'm going to take the serger, secure this, okay, so the interfacing is secured to the outer fabric on both sides. They won't fold back. In fact, I'm going to have to cut this so they match. I'm going to have to cut this a little bit like so. Those match. And the same on the other side. Like, see it, like that. This will have to be cut now. Like that. Now with the serger, I'm going to start here. Okay. That way this gets serged closed. So let's go to the serger. So we have to head to the serger camera, which is this one. Then we go to the serger microphone, which is that one. Something like that. All right, go over. We're spending a fair amount of time at the serger. Now, as you can see it, I know this is another poor camera. You see it, here's the interfacing. We're going to serge that closed as we serge the bottom like this. That secures the interfacing. Now, another interesting thing is here, I'm going to be reserging this And by serging this, in addition to the hem, this will also provide some protection in securing the side seam. Now, obviously, they wouldn't do this on the plastic raincoat, but it's just one more thing that I do to make sure that the side seams in my garments are well and secure. So we're going across the back right now. Same thing over here, okay? Now I'm going to stop right here because what I have to do is to turn this over so that I can see so that I can properly serge in over the bottom of the interfacing and not serge out and causing it to pucker. So now we're going in, we're going to meet the other serging and then veer off like that. And now the bottom is now serged. That secured these seams, although they are double seams, they're already secured. Now I'm going to do the hem for the bottom after I cut off the trailings from the serger like that. And this one, this one as well. We'll cut that one. All right. Okay. Now we're going to do the hem at the bottom of the shirt. So now I'm going to go right straight to the machine. Okay, that. Unfortunately, you have to move the camera back because we have the whole shirt here, and this is going to be in the way. This is why I'm going to have to find another solution. Either a good camera with a zoom lens off in that direction or one in the back. That's something I've got to figure out. So anyhow, enough of that. So now, here is the bottom of the shirt, right here. This is the outside of the bottom. We're going to fold the hem under about an inch like this, okay, all the way across. Now, when we get to the seam, that means that the seam, side seam can be folded under like this. As you can see, there's the stitching going down and then underneath. So when I sew across here with the top stitching on the side, that's going to further secure this seam. So we got 3 ways it's secured. It's done, actually 4 ways. First of all, it's a double seam. Secondly, we've done the back and forth for both parts of the seam. Thirdly, we've serged across it. And fourthly, we're going to do the hem top stitch over it. That may be overkill. But at least for those raincoats, they could have done, even if they didn't want to do the double seaming, they could have done the back and forth, or they could have glued it, which they can, the seam glue, or properly anchored it in the hem. Now, there might have been a fashion reason for not anchoring it, but to me, that's a design consideration that kind of pits fashion against durability. But that's probably a whole other PhD discussion. Now, here I am. I'm doing the top stitch for the hem. Now, making sure it's folded an inch. I press. I can feel it where it's folded. I'm about 3/4 of an inch up for the seam. Okay. Now, that's the side of the shirt. Now, we're going over the seam. Over this seam. As I said, that's going to be securing it. Yet again, we're now in the back of the shirt. Now let's double check the the tensions look okay. Sometimes you get, this is a lighter fabric, so sometimes if the tensions change, it can affect it, but I think we're okay. We might loosen it just a tiny bit, just for the fun of it. So that doesn't pucker. It's a tiny bit too tight. Let's see, that's the top. Let's loosen the top a tiny bit while we're on the lighter of the two fabrics at the foot of the shirt. Let's see how that looks and feels. That's a little bit better. So I'm going to leave it there. So you sometimes, depending upon your fabric, you may end up having to, what I call ride the tension, change it as you're going over different fabrics or different numbers of layers of fabric or whatever. Some people just set the tension in the machine and leave it, but that could lead to some problems. And now we're getting off the back of the shirt, to the side of the shirt. We just went over the other side seam, and we're coming back to the front of the shirt. So, all right, and that's the hem. Back and forth a bit. All right, secured the seam there. So, I think that's it. Let's go back to the main camera, which is position there. See, there's. I think that's it. I think we're done. I'm going to go ahead and try to model it. I'm going to move the camera up a bit. All right, yeah, you can see me there. All right. Hello, what? Yeah, you can hear me as well. Okay, there we are. Turn it right side out, like that. All right, get the collar turned up right. Now I'm wearing this over a shirt, so it's getting a little bit tight, but it's ample big. Snapping it together. All right, okay. There we are. Ample big, going over shirts with plenty big. Collar fits, collar looks like it's okay. Sleeves are fine. Look like everything's okay there at the back. And the front, so there we are. 3 sessions, and we have 1 new shirt. So, that's that project. I want to thank you all very much for following me on that and helping me along. So who knows what the next project will be. I think it will probably be yet another simple shirt so I can have a small supply of fairly light shirts for the upcoming warm summer season. But we'll see. I've got a lot of colored fabrics in my fabric case behind me, so we'll see. And I will keep you all posted. So once again, thank you very much. And I love you all, and I hope to see you in town. If you see me, stop me and say hi. And of course, we'll maintain social distancing, but I love you all.